we present part 4 of This Little Light, a series of documentaries on Mississippi in 1964.
During the summer of 1964, almost 1,000 volunteers flowed into Mississippi to take part in civil rights activities under the direction of the Mississippi Summer Project sponsored by COFO, the Council of Federated Organizations. The stimulus for COFO and the Summer Project, however, came from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. It would not be easy, as James Foreman, the executive secretary of SNCC, was quick to admit.
Many of the people in civil rights forces felt that we were foolish to go to Mississippi, that one couldn't accomplish anything by working in Mississippi. Well, we rejected that concept. Rejected, first of all, because people were suffering. Secondly, other people were not prepared to go there, and we were. Thirdly, as I said, because of the political significance of that area. So it's not that we're just going to Mississippi this summer. We've been there, we've established firm bases within Mississippi, otherwise this program wouldn't be possible. It's not a superimposed program. It's, one might say, an organic program growing out of the struggle of the last 3 years in that particular state.
The civil rights volunteers would not be welcome. That was made amply clear during the preceding year by state leaders, by Governor Paul Johnson and former Governor Ross Barnett, and of course, most brutally, by the events during the first week of the summer.
You and I and others throughout the nation have been witnessing communist front organizations recently. Demonstrators, sit-in strikers, hoodlums and left-wingers, freedom riders and such groups as that. But thank God, most of them get in jail when they come to Jackson.
I have talked during this first primary about the accomplishments of this great administration, of which I have been fortunate to be a part, thanks to the wonderful people of this state. We've made a great deal of this improvement, my friends, because we have lost from our state some 251,000 Negroes, and we've gained in exchange some 73,000 wonderful Yankees that have come into our state with their ingenuity, their know-how, their get-up and get. They've caused many of our people to see wonderful opportunities that have lain dormant under our doorstep almost unnoticed all these years.
It is 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Saturday, June 27. The sun is low, the sky cloudless, the temperature high in the 90s, and the atmosphere thick, pungent, and sticky. Some 100 reporters, local and state police, FBI agents, and curious citizens have gathered at a bridge spanning the Pearl River a few miles outside the town of Philadelphia, Mississippi. The citizens talk and laugh and watch with bemused interest. The press snaps its pictures, exposes its film, takes notes. The FBI men, along with members of the Mississippi State Fish and Game Commission, man 3 flat-bottom boats which move up and down a short stretch of the brown, mud-thick river, back and forth, each lacing across the course of the others to cover every inch of the stream's 20-yard width. Each has let into the water a heavy iron bar attached to ropes at either end. Appended to each bar are 3 grappling hooks which drag along behind the bar on the river bottom, up and down, back and forth, one section after another, moving slowly by steps downstream under the thick and lush green foliage of swamp growth, which arches over from either side and hides the river for long stretches almost completely from aerial view. The air is full of bird song, and the sizzling of crickets so constant and steady that one soon ceases to notice. The river is full of hooks, dragging up and down, from one side to the other, searching for the bodies of 3 young men who had by then been missing a full week. The occasion was a grim one, and the first heavy tug on the drag ropes put a temporary stop to levity and chatter. Only temporary. It was only a Jackson newspaper box, metal and plexiglass, inscribed Clarion Ledger. Later, a heavy chain. Banal little jokes mocking the search. Vignettes. Parents bringing their children, small and large, to watch the show. A great corpulent Philadelphia policeman with a knotted face places his hand on the shoulder of a younger Philadelphia policeman and gives it a reassuring squeeze as the two look out on the water, father and son-like. Only vignettes. They will not be found on this afternoon in this stretch of river, nor will they be found at subsequent locations the following day. Not Sunday, not Monday, not Tuesday. 400 sailors from the naval base in Meridian, accompanied by the state police, carry the search on land, through the dense forest and thickets, and over the red clay hills of Neshoba County.
The three missing civil rights workers were James Cheney, a 21-year-old construction worker from Meridian, Mississippi, Michael Schwerner, a 24-year-old graduate student from New York City, who with his wife, Rita, had set up a community center in Meridian, and Andrew Goodman, a 20-year-old college student from New York who had been in Mississippi only 48 hours before he disappeared. They were all taking part in COFO's Mississippi Summer Project.
Last December, we began organizing for the Summer Project, and we are hoping to get some 1,000 people, including some 700 teachers, 150 lawyers, perhaps 125 ministers involved in the program this summer.
Can you tell us some of the specific projects that these potentially these projected 1,000 people will be taking part in?
Well, first of all, there would be the massive voter registration activities.
This will be statewide, not
statewide. Statewide. 2 community centers, primarily in the Delta and in other areas if we can establish them. Freedom schools and about 30 points in the state if we're permitted by the state to hold them. And I say that because there's recently been a law passed saying that the holding of classes or instructional groups is illegal without permission from the county superintendent of education. Then the fourth area is to have this law student research or law student project to get law students to work on grassroots level with people, to work in the white community. If we're going to be successful in Mississippi, ultimately we must crack through the barriers of race, and we hope to develop alliances within the white community. We will have Mississippi Research Project, and there will be a great emphasis upon the arts also.
The core of the summer project was the idea of volunteers in large numbers, drawing the attention of the nation to conditions in Mississippi. They came from all parts of America, and some from Europe, and even more distant parts of the world. They came in staggered groups, and as many as possible were sent through training programs in Oxford, Ohio. Representative of those who I met throughout the state are Jane Addams of Ava, Illinois, young, quiet, and attractive, and Mike Peoria of New York City, robust and red-haired with a quick intelligence and intensity. We asked them about their experiences at Oxford.
What could you just briefly describe what the course was like, what you learned? And
well, the course attempted, I think, to do 2 things explicitly, and that was one, to make clear to the students that were coming to Mississippi what Mississippi was like, the dangers which they faced, and to train them to deal with those dangers, and in terms of just procedures, how the movement operated, in terms of checking in at night, not checking in when you leave one place and moving on to another, not going out at night, and so on. And the second thing was to train people in the specific thing they were going to do in Mississippi. Implicitly, I think there was a third factor in the orientation session, and that was an attempt to introduce people to what was involved in the movement and to get them to begin to think in depth about the problem of integration and how to approach it. And perhaps that was the most valuable thing in terms of the orientation session, because it seemed to, I think, that the leaders feel that you cannot operate in Mississippi and you cannot undertake the kind of project that we're undertaking here unless you are thinking and continually thinking and reevaluating the problem of integration and of its converse segregation.
it was, of course, it was during the session that you received the news of the disappearance of the 3 COFO workers in Neshoba County. I wonder if you could describe precisely how that was presented to you as a group, or how you both heard about that first. Either.
Well, Bob Moses was describing the dangers of Mississippi, that were involved in Mississippi on the stage. And at the end of his presentation, somebody came up to him and explained, I gather this took place off stage, that the disappearance was now, they were absolutely sure they had disappeared, and that the situation looked quite hopeless. And Bob then came out on the stage and described what had happened and how serious the situation. And then, oh, that's true.
Rita spoke more than Bob did, actually. That was one of the men's wives, Rita Schwerner. And
that's the
she
wife
was,
of one of the people.
yes. And she got up, she asked to speak, because Bob Moses was just very struck by it, and he could not say very much. And so she spoke, and she told us what had happened. And she didn't say at that time that they suspected that they had been killed. But at that time there was still a lot of hope left that they were alive, because it was very soon after it happened. And she just told us what had happened. And then Bob Moses got up and reemphasized how serious this was. We were all very deeply moved by it.
The thread that connected the disappearance of the 3 civil rights workers to the certainty that they were dead, and finally to the discovery of their bodies, wove persistently through the summer, touching and modifying everything that happened in Mississippi. During the summer, the reaction of all of us could be partially suspended, for we did not then know precisely what had happened to them. Now we do. Michael Schwerner and James Chaney were attending an orientation conference in Ohio when they heard the news that the Mount Zion Methodist Church near Philadelphia, Mississippi, had burned to the ground, and that some of their Negro friends who lived near the church had been badly beaten. They returned to their Meridian base on Saturday, June 20th, and the next day set out for Neshoba County to find out what happened. With them was Andrew Goodman. The story which follows is pieced together from information collected last summer in Mississippi by Dave Welsh. It includes information from witnesses.
Mr. Posey, why did you leave Mississippi?
Because the Sheriff Rainey had threatened my life, and the Ku Klux Klan I was going was pulled on me this past Saturday night, and they told me that you had 3 nigger lovers, I'm quote, we got 3 nigger lovers dead in the swamps of Neshoba County, and Pearl River swamps are dead, and you're going to be the 4th nigger lover.
Mr. Posey, when did you first hear that the 3 civil rights workers were missing?
At 2:45 a.m.
Schwerner and Chaney set up the COFO office in Meridian early in 1964. Their mission was to build a movement among Negroes in Meridian and in neighboring Neshoba County. Chaney knew people in Neshoba and often traveled the 40 miles to Longdale, near Philadelphia, to talk with local Negroes about the movement. Schwerner sometimes went with him. In the 2 months before their death, the trip to Longdale became an almost regular Tuesday night event. On several of those trips, Neshoba County Sheriff Lawrence Rainey had chased the COFO station wagon in his sheriff's car, but each time Chaney and Schwerner had outrun him. Once a member of the sheriff's department took their pictures as they were stopped at an intersection. Then on May 31st, Schwerner and Chaney held a mass meeting at the Mount Zion Church, and the parishioners agreed to let COFO establish a freedom school there. After that meeting, Rainey and his deputies made frequent trips to Longdale, an area they had seldom visited before. The summer project was about to begin. The Neshoba and Meridian clans were prepared to try to stop it. Killing a civil rights worker would be an object lesson to the county's Negroes, and Michael Schwerner, bearded and self-confident, especially enraged them. Klansmen had noticed the Tuesday night pattern of the COFO visits to Longdale. Thus on Tuesday, June 16th, when elders of the Mount Zion Church held their weekly meeting to pay the preacher, the Klan, knowing little of the Negroes' religious habits, may have assumed it was a civil rights meeting. The church elders came out to find a phalanx of more than 25 armed men standing in military fashion near the church. It gave every appearance of being a lynch party. "Where are the white people?" the Negroes were asked. "Where is that nigger-loving Jew communist with the beard?" Not finding what they came for, the mob beat 3 of the Negroes with clubs and fists and burned down the church. Sheriff Rainey and his deputy, Cecil Price, were among those at the church that night. When Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman drove to Longdale the next Sunday to investigate, they knew the risks. They knew that the tag number of their car was on a list circulated by the Citizens' Councils. What they did not know was that minutes after they left the Meridian COFO office, a telephone call was placed to Philadelphia, giving their time of departure and destination. About noon, as they were poking around the church ruins, Deputy Sheriff Price drove by and observed them. Shortly before 3 o'clock, they started back to Meridian. Deputy Price, a state highway patrol car, and several others followed them. Cheney tried to outrun them, as he had several times before, only this time Deputy Price was not to be outrun. Overtaken, the station wagon skidded to a stop, and the posse escorted their captives to Philadelphia. Just outside town, the caravan stopped, and a flat tire on the station wagon was changed. Price placed the three men under formal arrest, had them driven to the jail, and locked up. Deputy Price said later that Cheney was arrested for speeding. Goodman and Schwerner were held on suspicion of arson. Price said he released the three men at 10:30 that evening, escorted the blue station wagon to the edge of town, and saw it disappear towards Meridian. The FBI, which later arrested 21 men in connection with the murders, said Price's participation in the affair did not stop there. The FBI charged that Price and 9 others intercepted the station wagon, then beat and killed the civil rights workers. A witness said a roadblock forced the station wagon to turn onto a dirt road, Route 491, where it was intercepted. A short time later, in an isolated farming area, James Cheney was bound to a post and beaten with chains. Schwerner and Goodman tried to stop the beating, but they were quickly subdued. Cheney's bones were so badly shattered that a New York pathologist who examined his body said the beating was in itself sufficient to have caused death. Soon afterward, the killers made sure. They fired 3 shots into Cheney and 1 shot each into the chests of Goodman and Schwerner. The bodies were buried in a dam under construction on the farm of Olin Burridge, one of those accused in the conspiracy charge. The contractor at the dam site was also named. So was Sheriff Rainey, a Philadelphia city policeman, a Baptist minister, and several Klansmen from Meridian. After disposing of the bodies, the killers set fire to the station wagon, and sometime the following day towed it to another site and set it afire again. Search parties turned up no sign of the missing men. On August 4th, the FBI, acting on information for which they reportedly paid $25,000, moved cranes to the dam site, and burrowing 14 feet into the now completed dam, went straight to the bodies. Then 4 months later came the arrests, and within a week the dismissal of conspiracy charges against the suspects. This in spite of the FBI's claim to have a signed confession from one member of the lynch mob. Few who know Mississippi hold out any real hope that the murderers of Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney will ever be convicted.
Much of this story was, of course, known, certainly by the citizens of Neshoba County. Louis Lomax has called Neshoba a closed society within the closed society. Its 5,000 whites belong to a handful of families, and Deputy Cecil Price, for example, claims at least 200 relatives in the county. When whites are under attack in Mississippi, other whites stand together and clam up. Mississippi was tense in the weeks following the disappearance, tense and hostile to any outsider. In Philadelphia, a car with Jackson license plates arose suspicion, and this suspicion is reflected in Philadelphia's most respectable citizens, like Howard Cole, the owner-manager of a local radio station, WHOC, who at least would talk to us on tape.
Let me start out by asking you this question. Why have the people of Philadelphia been so tense with respect to the press?
I don't think the matter is a matter of being tense with the members of the press. I think that you would find the same thing happening in most any community when a bunch of, or I should say a group of people come in, expected or even unexpected. The uncertainty of why they're here, what they expect to find or accomplish, I think this is something you'll find in most any community under similar circumstances.
Have there been any special circumstances added to this? What would be a general rule in any town this size?
No, I wouldn't think so.
Well, is there perhaps in the special nature or the particular nature of this of the story here now an added increment? If the press had come to cover another kind of thing, might it have been less of a problem?
Well, let's put it this way. I don't know of anything that's ever happened here in Philadelphia that's caused such an influx. So you're putting a question to me that I can't answer, because we have an Indian fair here. We have the Neshoba County Fair, which are both quite unusual and unique. We have newsmen in to cover them. But then the number of newsmen that are there are very small. And consequently here we have had a deluge of newsmen. Mm-hmm. So there's no way to say.
You've seen some of the results of the work done by national press since they've been in town on television and perhaps out-of-town newspapers. Do you have any principal criticisms of that coverage?
Well, I believe Neshoba County was referred to as Bloody Neshoba, which I don't think was in good taste, even if, well, let's just say that I don't feel it was in good taste to use such a term in connection with any community. I have also heard it referred to as the backward, or one of the most backward areas of all the backward areas. You will find these areas in just about any state in the United States you wish to go to. You have rugged individuals living back in these areas. And because any state has areas that are rather rugged in terrain or nature, I don't think that a whole state should be criticized for it.
How do you think the people here in Philadelphia feel about this whole COFO project, and how do you personally feel about it?
I'm afraid I wouldn't be qualified to express an opinion for the people of the area, and I do not know enough about their movement and so forth to say anything one way or the other.
But there were others in Mississippi who knew enough of COFO's program to admit that they didn't like it. On the Sunday following the disappearance of 3 civil rights workers, over 300 volunteers arrived from Oxford, Ohio. They were not welcome.
Jane, when did you get to Canton?
Got here this morning around 9:30 or 10 o'clock.
This afternoon about 12 on the train.
And you both have recently just gotten back from the police station, an interview that was conducted there. Tell us about that. What was that all about?
I think that you can describe it in these terms. The police came to us and asked that we go down and voluntarily register with the police. Now, this in itself may not seem to be a particularly difficult request to meet, but on the other hand, it's part of the pattern of harassment that COFO has experienced in Mississippi. And we would have liked to be able to say that to the police that we would not go voluntarily to register, and that they would have had to arrest us or take us down for investigation if they wanted us to register. However, instead of saying that they would arrest us on the spot and take us all down in mass to be registered, they said that if we refused to come voluntarily now, that they would arrest us as sometime in the following week when we were at work in the field in the rural areas of the county, and that they would refuse to return us to the place that they arrested us from. In other words, they would take us to some local, relatively secluded courthouse, and we would then be forced to register, and then they just release us at the door, and there would be nothing we could do. And that is precisely the kind of thing that gives rise to the incidents like that which took place in Philadelphia.
Jane, would you describe for us just exactly what this registration was? What did they do?
Well, they took us in the cars to the police station and the sheriff's office and talked to us a bit about why they were doing it, saying that it was for our own protection. And then they played a tape that had been made up by the county attorney, in which this was brought out that it was for our own personal safety, and also that we were outsiders coming in against the without being invited against the will of the community and so forth. And then we went outside of the main room, and about 6 people at a time filled out the forms, which asked for our name, occupation, name, age, sex, height, weight, eye color, hair color. Then when we filled the form out, filled it out, our name was written on a slate, our picture was taken, the name against us, and we were given a card that said that we were certified by we had registered with the police here.
For at least a year, Mississippi authorities had been building a climate of hate and fear. You heard Governor Johnson and Ross Barnett at the beginning of this program. For months before that, Mississippi had built what Professor James Silver called a closed society, to put a halt to the invasion. If the fear and intimidation were intended to discourage the summer volunteers, it was wrong. Liberals in the North suggested after the disappearance of Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner that perhaps the volunteers shouldn't be sent in. The volunteers themselves felt differently.
Personally, what was the impact with you? Didn't you feel a moment that maybe the best thing to do was to forget the summer? Or?
No, I've never felt that I should not go, because I think I've realized for quite a long time, at least intellectually, that one can get killed down in Mississippi. And so I confronted it before, and I didn't feel like I would go back.
I think that the reaction of, well, not all the people there, but a lot of them was quite the reverse of wanting to go home. The feeling was that this meant definitely that we had to go. And I think that perhaps people fail to understand that really the effect of deaths within this movement is to increase, is to create an even deeper feeling that you've got to go on because those deaths have to be justified.
And to harden the people.
Perhaps this is not the way to approach the poem. Perhaps the deaths remove your intellectual perspective, and they create an emotional environment in which it's difficult to judge this thing clearly. But in the sense that they do create an emotional environment in which you're looking at the situation, it's not an emotional environment in which you want to leave and go home. It's an emotional environment in which, boy, you're going to go down there.
Yeah.
Late in the evening.
Almost 1,000 volunteers eventually came to Mississippi during the summer of 1964. They were teachers, students, lawyers, folk singers, doctors, and journalists. You will meet some of them in the rest of the programs in this series. Their presence helped to begin the process of change in Mississippi. And for many, Mississippi began a process of change in them. Few were well known. Most went back to school in the North. Some stayed on for the next year or two. Some were harassed. Some were untouched. Some were beaten, like Mike Peoria was eventually. They are part of the story of Mississippi, and Mississippi is now part of them.
This has been part 4 of This Little Light, a series of documentaries on Mississippi in 1964. The programs were produced from field recordings made in Mississippi by Chris Koch, Dale Miner, and Dave Walsh. The portion of the interview with Buford Posey was made available by the Civil Rights Information Service. Production assistants were Kathy Dopkin and Willie Ross. This program was written and produced by Dale Miner and Chris Koch for Pacifica Radio.